The night I almost lost my best friend forever was the same night I realized I had been in love with his little sister for years. It happened during a thunderstorm in a small town outside Nashville, Tennessee. Rain hammered against my windows, and the power flickered every few seconds. I was sitting alone in my living room when someone pounded on my front door so hard that it sounded like an emergency. When I opened it, I froze. Standing there, soaked from head to toe, was Hannah Carter, my best friend Nathan's little sister, and she was crying. Before we continue, if you believe in kindness, hope, forgiveness, compassion, and second chances, please take a moment to like this video. Leave a comment, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories that remind us how powerful the human heart can be. For most of my life, Hannah had simply been Nathan's younger sister. Nathan and I had grown up together. We played baseball in the same parks, attended the same church, and survived countless mistakes side by side. Hannah was always around, trailing behind us as a cheerful kid with bright eyes and endless questions. Years passed. Nathan moved to Texas for work. I stayed in Tennessee and built a small landscaping business. Hannah went away to college in Kentucky and returned years later as a school counselor. Somewhere along the way, the little girl I remembered became an extraordinary woman. She was kind without expecting recognition, strong without needing attention, and thoughtful in ways that made people feel seen. Still, she was my best friend's sister. That line felt impossible to cross. That stormy night, Hannah stepped inside my house trembling. Her mother had suffered a mild stroke earlier that evening. Doctors believed she would recover, but Hannah had spent hours at the hospital alone because Nathan couldn't get a flight home until morning. The fear she had carried all day finally broke through. I made coffee. While she sat at the kitchen table, the storm raged outside. But inside, something unexpected happened. For the first time, we weren't simply connected through Nathan. We talked for hours, as two adults carrying different burdens. She told me how exhausting it was always being the strong one. I admitted how lonely life had become since my father's passing 2 years earlier. We shared memories, regrets, dreams, and fears we had never spoken aloud. By midnight, the storm had eased. So had something inside both of us. When she finally smiled, it felt like sunlight after weeks of rain. Nothing dramatic happened that night. There was no grand declaration, no sudden romance. But everything changed. Over the following months, Hannah's mother recovered steadily. Nathan returned to Texas. Life appeared normal from the outside. But Hannah and I found ourselves spending more time together. We volunteered at church events, shared dinners after work, and took long walks along the Cumberland River. The deeper our friendship grew, the harder it became to ignore my feelings. The real problem wasn't Hannah. It was Nathan. He had been my brother in every way except blood. The idea of telling him terrified me. What if he thought I had betrayed his trust? What if our friendship never recovered? So I stayed silent. Unfortunately, silence has a way of creating its own problems. Months later, Nathan visited Tennessee unexpectedly. During a community fundraiser, he noticed the way Hannah and I looked at each other. He noticed how naturally we stood together. He noticed things neither of us had been brave enough to admit. The expression on his face told me everything. He wasn't happy. For days afterward, he barely spoke to me. The distance hurt more than I expected. I wasn't just afraid of losing a relationship, I was afraid of losing the person who had stood beside me through every major chapter of my life. Finally, I drove to the lake where we used to fish as teenagers. Nathan was already there. For nearly an hour we sat in silence, staring at the water. Then I told him everything. I told him how hard I had tried not to develop feelings. I told him how much I respected Hannah. I told him that if my relationship with her ever threatened her happiness, I would walk away. Most importantly, I told him I would never intentionally hurt either of them. The sun was setting when Nathan finally spoke. He admitted that his anger came from fear. Hannah was his little sister. Protecting her had always been part of who he was. Letting go of that role felt harder than he expected. Then he looked at me and smiled, the same smile I had known since childhood. In that moment, the weight I had carried for months disappeared. A year later, beneath a canopy of oak trees outside a small church in Tennessee, I stood beside Hannah and promised to spend my life loving her. Nathan stood next to me as my best man. When I looked into the crowd, I saw Hannah's mother wiping tears from her eyes. I saw friends and family smiling. I saw people who had witnessed our journey from uncertainty to trust. Most of all, I saw gratitude. Not because everything had been easy, but because the hardest conversations had led to the greatest blessings. Before we reach the end of this story, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever faced a situation where honesty felt terrifying, but telling the truth changed everything? Share your experience in the comments below. Years later, I still think about that stormy night. Sometimes life doesn't change through dramatic miracles. Sometimes it changes because one frightened person knocks on a door and another person chooses to open it. If this story touched your heart, please leave a like, share it with someone who believes in second chances, and subscribe for more inspiring stories. Your support helps these messages of hope reach people who may need them most, because sometimes the greatest love stories don't begin with a perfect plan. They begin with kindness, courage, and a single moment that changes everything.